A-Level Biology 9700. The topic is transpiration and transport of water. And transpiration is the process of water movement through a plant and its evaporation from aerial parts such as leaves, stem, and plants. Simply, we can say that transpiration is actually the loss of water, loss of extra water, because water is necessary for plants, but only a small amount of water taken up by the roots is used for growth and metabolism. The remaining 97 to 99.5% is lost by transpiration and mutation. The water is compulsory for the process of photosynthesis, but extra water is not required for it. Only a small quantity of water is needed because water is also producing as a result of respiration. So water is required in very small quantity. So the remaining water, which is extra, it is evaporated through aerial parts, especially the stomata and the other, you can say the flowers and buds as well. So extra water is evaporated into the air. So when water is evaporated into the air, we can show it with this diagram. We can explain it with diagram as water is absorbed through the soil, and then water, or we can also give water to the plants if there is severe sunlight. And in the presence of sunlight, the process of photosynthesis takes place. So water is absorbed through the soil by the root hair cells, and then it moves in the upward direction. From the stem, it moves towards the leaves, and leaves, when the leaves, the stomatas are present, so extra water is evaporated through the stomatas. So when water is present in the soil, when it is absorbed from the soil, so at that time, the water enters root hair cells by the process of osmosis. And osmosis is a process in which the water molecules move from their higher water potential towards the lower water potential. So at that time, the water potential is high into the soil. So at that time, the water molecules move from the soil, they enter into the root hair cell, and this happens when the water potential in the soil surrounding the root is higher than in the cell. So water diffuses from the soil into the root hair down its concentration gradient. So in this way, water molecules are absorbed by the process of osmosis, because water uh, uh, molecules are in higher water potential into the soil. So these water molecules will enter into the root hair cell. So as a result of the entrance of these water molecules into the root hair cell, the water potential of the root hair cell will become high as comparison to other cells, as for example the cortex. So cortex are the neck cells in which the water will move from root hair cells to the cortex. So water moves by osmosis into the neck cell. So some of the water may also just seep through the spaces between the cells or through the cell walls, never actually entering a cell. So in this way, the water will move in all those directions in all other cells where the water potential was low. So because water is always moving from its higher water potential towards the lower water potential, so it will move, water will move, it will seep through all those cells which had low water potential. So water movement will take place continuously. So water vapors evaporating from a leaf creates a. So in this way, the this water will enter into the xylem, and from xylem the water will move in the stem xylem, and then from stem xylem it will move towards the leaves through the xylem of the leaf. So in this way, water will move out of the leaf by the stomatas. So when water is evaporated from the stomata, so at that time the water vapors which are evaporating from a leaf creates a kind of suction as water is evaporating from the stomata. So a suction or a pulling force is produced in the downward direction. As you can say, when you suck a drink from a straw, At that time, a sucking force helps the drink to move into the straw. So the same case is taking place over here. The evaporation of water through the stomata create a suction force. So a pressure is created. So its pressure at the top of vessels is lower than that at the bottom. Our water moves up in the stem in the xylem. You know that when there is a pressure of water is high, as comparison to other sides. So where the water pressure is high, the water will move from that place towards the other direction where the pressure is low. So at that time, in at the top of vessels is the lower water potential as comparison to the bottom. So the more water is drawn into the leaf from the xylem. So in this way, water is moving in the upward direction in the form of a stream. This is which is called as the transpiration stream. So pulling water up from the root, mature xylem cells have no cells contents, so they act like open-ended tubes allowing free movement of water through roots. So the roots also produce a root pressure forcing water up xylem vessel. So roots pressure is also responsible for it, but root pressure is not, you can say, helpful for the plants which have very you can say heights which have heights. So the root pressure is able to you can say push the water only to you can say only in small plants. So water moves from xylem to enter leaf tissues down water potential gradient. In the leaves, water passes out of the xylem vessels into the surrounding cells. So in this way, water moves from the root hair cells to the cortex. From the cortex, it will move towards the from the cortex. It will move into the xylem, root xylem, from root xylem to stem xylem. So from stem xylem towards the leaf xylem. So it all movement of water can be shown in this diagram. You can see, first of all, I would like to show this plant. Is plant, you can say the water is entering through the root hair cells and it is moving in the upward direction, and the extra water is evaporating out into the air by the process of transpiration is taking place in this figure. So small portion of this root hair has been shown over here. You can see the root hair cell is there. And in the root hair cells, the water potential is high into the soil. So water is entering through root hair cells and it is reaching to the root cortex. So this is the root epidermis. First of all, the water will enter to the root hair cell, then it will reach to the root cortex. From root cortex, the water, as you know, the root cortex will have higher water potential when it will enter from the root hair cell. So at that time, the xylem has less water potential as comparison to this cortex, root cortex. So water will enter into the root xylem, and from root xylem, it will enter into the stem xylem. And in this way, the water will move in the upward direction and it will reach into the leaf xylem and into leaf xylem. And there is palisade mesophyll and spongy mesophyll, which will absorb the water for the process of photosynthesis, and the extra water will be evaporated through the stomata. So in this way, the movement in the upward direction will take place. So for this movement of water, there are some forces which play their role to evaporate the water or to evaporate the extra water from the plants, because it is very much compulsory, because extra water cannot stay inside the plant. So it has to be evaporated, because if continuously the process is taking place, so water is needed or water should be evaporated through the plant. So what are those forces which help the water to move through the xylem? So the movement of water up to xylem vessel is by mass flow. Mass flow means there are some dissolved salts inside that water. So they move together as a body of liquid like water in a river. And you can see whenever you want to pick up a drop of water, it is not possible. So it means you cannot separate the water molecules from one another. They always stick together. So this is the helped by the fact that water molecules are attached to each other by hydrogen bonding, because they have, all water molecules have hydrogen bonding between them. So this attraction of interacting with one another, or you can say sticking with one another, is called as cohesion. So they collide with one another, they stick together, then the process or the attraction is called as cohesion. They are also attracted to the cellulose and lignin in the walls of these xylem vessels. So you can see when the molecules are moving in the xylem, so these water molecules are attached with one another. They are not only attached with one another, but also they adhere with the cellulose or lignin wall. You can say cellulose is also present with the lignin in the walls of xylem. So they also adhere with the walls, and this is called as adhesion, or this property of adherence is called as adhesion. So cohesion and adhesion help to keep the water in a xylem vessel moving as a continuous column. So water will move continuously in the upward direction. So in the form of a column. So the fact that the cells are dead is an advantage, because it means there is no problem for protoplasm to get in the way of transport. So in this way, water moves in the upward direction. So, a continuous column of water is formed at that time. So if an air bubble is formed in the column, air bubble, sometimes it can happen, it can form. So the column of the water breaks, and the difference in pressure between the water at the top and the water at the bottom cannot be transmitted to the vessel. We say there is an air loss. So, the blood, the vessels, through the xylem vessels, if there is continuous flow, if there is bubble inside, so what will happen? There will be the air low. So the water stops moving upward. Water will be unable to move in the upward direction. It is blocked by a drop, or you can say the air lock. So the small diameter of xylem vessels help to prevent such breaks from occurring. Also, the pits in the vessel wall allow water to move. So pits, pits, pits. What are pits? When lignification takes place, a type of lignification at some places of the uh, xylem vessel, lignin is not formed. So at that is called as pitted lignification. So in that case, these pits helps the water to move out, extra water, because in this way, the xylem protect itself from bursting. So the pathways of water, when the water move through the roots and or in the upward direction. So first of all, there are two different routes which the water can get into the xylem vessels. So the symplast pathway and the apoplast pathway. If the water travels via the symplast pathway, then it travels from cell to cell through the cytoplasm. You can see if there are two cells, so the water will move to the cytoplasm. The plasmodesmata is present in the wall, so water will move to the cytoplasm, and it will pass through the plasmodesmata, and it will enter into the other cells. So in this way, the neighboring cells are connected by small channels in the cell walls called the plasmodesmata. So the water will move from one cell towards the other cell, so it will pass through the cytoplasm. However, if water is traveling via the apoplast pathway, then it passes from cell to cell through the cell wall. You can see in this way, there is no involvement of cytoplasm at that time, because water will move in this way. It will move through cell wall to cell wall. So in this way, it will move through cell wall to cell wall. So it is simplest pathway, and it is apoplast. So easily making this the main pathway that water uses to move from the roots to the xylem. But here is a problem with the apoplast pathway, that the problem with the apoplast pathway is that the water is bypassing the cell membrane. It is directly passing through the cell wall. There is no connection with the cell membrane. So, the cell membrane uh, act as a job is to control what is going into the cell and ensure harmful substance such as toxins do not make their way in. It controls the traffic. Cell membrane controls the traffic. So when cell membrane is not involved in the movement of the water, then the toxins can also enter into the cell, because only the cell membrane is there, which act as a barrier to control the traffic. But in that case, it can be harmful for the cell. So the root therefore has something called the Casparian strip, which is a waxy strip within the cell wall which is impermeable to water. This forces the water to go through a cell membrane, which can then control which substance are allowed to enter the plants. Once water has passed through the Casparian strip, it can then reach the xylem. So the Casparian strips are present in the roots, which will help the water to this to pass through a cell membrane, which can then control which substance are allowed to enter the plant. So it will, in this way, the roots play their role, very significant role, you can say, which is helpful for the plants. So it was all about the transpiration and transport of food. And thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel.